going on?
Too much, David. Late night with the Heat Check podcast. This is kind of different than what we're used to.
Yeah, we haven't done. It reminds me of
Finals, right?
the final bubbles
Yeah.
run. We were recording at like 2 a.m. because those games were at 9
Yeah.
p.m. every night. We're recording this after midnight. Heat has just won game 2 in a very convincing fashion, I thought. I missed pretty much the entire first half because I was at an F1 thing during the day and was driving back home from Miami Gardens. You guys all know how that early evening traffic can be on I-95. But, kind of up double digits, like basically the entire second half. Every time the Sixers kind of put together a little push, the Heat had an answer. Bam was fantastic. Jimmy was awesome. 23 and 10 and 12, I think, for him tonight.
22 and 12.
22 and 12 for him. Obviously, still no Kyle Lowry, still no Joel Embiid. To me, the biggest takeaway from the first couple of games of this series is, as soon as Joel Embiid, we found out he wasn't going to play the first couple of games. I think everyone was in the series, but they had to do what they did here in Miami. They had to be up 2-0, or you were going to give the Sixers a little bit of life. Now they go to game 3 in Philly on Friday with a real chance to kind of step on their throats.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, the Heat have just taken care of business, right? Like, this is what they're supposed to do.
Nothing two convincing, solid wins. Nothing spectacular.
Yeah, nothing
24
spectacular.
from Tyler Hero in game 1, 23 from Bam in game 2. Jimmy solid both games. Strus hitting threes. It's been the kind of just grind it out.
Yeah, and I think the hope for Philly was that James Harden could turn back the clock and maybe go vintage James Harden and steal one of these games. But look, he just hasn't looked like the James Harden of old at all. The Heat are doing a really good job at containing.
He's invisible in these games.
It's like he took 15 shots tonight. I think the last game he took 13 or 12 shots. That's not enough when you don't have Joel Embiid. I know the Heat are making it tough on him. They're trying to get the ball out of his hands. They're picking him up full court. They're sending, they're basically treating him like Trae Young. And it's working. I mean, PJ Tucker is picking him up full court. That's tough on James Harden. Plus, when he gets down there, he has not only PJ on him, but every Heat defender, all eyes on him, trying to cut off his drives. He's settling for step back threes. He finished with 9 assists tonight, so he's obviously trying to facilitate since the Heat are trying to take him away. But without Joel Embiid, he needs to go out for 30. It's kind of cliche, but he needs to have a 30-point dominant game for them to win without Joel. So they've done a really good job on James. Tyrese Maxey went off a little bit because
Maxey's awesome. I love that guy.
Maxey's good, and he's
he's their best player.
Yeah, and he's fast. He's so quick. I think he's really taking advantage of the Heat doubling James, and then James finds him, and when they closing out to Maxey, he just drives right past the defender. So that's been an effective weapon for Philly. And to be honest, I don't know what they shot in the paint 27 of 44 tonight. They outscored the Heat 54 to 42. Philly shot 11 of 40 on non-paint shots tonight, which is 27% or something. If they would just hit a few perimeter shots, this would have been a close game. Yeah. But they just could not hit outside shots tonight. And really, for the first 2 games of the series, they've had a lot of trouble shooting. And that was one of the criticisms of this roster when they made the trade for James Harden. They gave up a lot of shooting in that deal, with losing Seth Curry. I think we're kind of seeing the flaws of this Philly team, but it's hard to blame them. I mean, they're missing their best player, the potential MVP of the NBA. So the Heat did what they're supposed to do. They're in a really good position. I think they're 18-0 all time when leading a series 2-0. So they're they aren't trying. Anything could happen, obviously, but
they're
in a very
at the point
good
where
spot.
it'd be kind of stunning if they don't win this series.
Yeah,
the way that's looked, the way we know Joel is probably unlikely for game 3, or at least whenever he comes back. It's he's coming off a concussion. That's not easy. He's gonna probably be wearing some kind of mask, I would guess. I don't know for sure.
But, definitely, yeah.
It's the Heat are in as good a position, obviously, as you could ask for after 2 games.
And by the way, Kyle Lowry hasn't played yet.
And
Like,
Kyle
yeah, I
Lowry,
know Joel's
yeah,
more
so like
valuable,
Joel is more
but
valuable, but like, yeah,
yeah, Kyle's
Kyle's
pretty
the
important.
third or fourth most valuable player too.
Right. And he, I've heard that there's some optimism he will return as well soon in this series, but you have to think like the more that he keeps winning without him, like maybe you just give him more time because
Yeah,
hamstrings are tricky. So I wonder if that plays a role in kind of the decision process of whether you bring him back or not. I'm guessing if they were down 0-2, if it was tied 1-1 right now, there might be
yeah,
more urgency, but who knows? Maybe the Heat say we can sit him out for one more game and give him a few more days to rest and just keep trying to push it back as far as they can just to make sure he's 100%. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's back. Kyle's back at some point soon as well.
yeah. The two, going back to the Harden thing, there kind of been two stories to me, other than the Embiid injury. Obviously, that's like the story I think of this series right now, right? As soon as that happened, the Heat becomes giant favorites. They've done what they like. This is what was supposed to happen. Um, one of the big stories has been Tyler Hero and Bam being awesome. I think in the first two games, after I think Bam averaged like 12 points a game in the first round, and Tyler had the one 25-point game, but otherwise it was kind of quiet. But Joel or James Harden has been straight up. He's been the Sixers' third best player in this series, and like if even if they had James Harden or even if they had Joel Embiid, if you had told me that James Harden was only going to be the Sixers' third best player in a series, I would say the Heat roll. And the fact that Maxey has outplayed him, and Tobias Harris, who was incredible in Game 1, has outplayed him too. Is the Sixers can't win like that. And that is, like you said, the flaws of this roster exposed. They don't have after it's a pretty big drop off talent wise, especially offensive talent wise after those three guys. Thibault is a good player, but an offensive
0
liability.
points tonight, 0 shots
Yeah,
with Apple.
an
So
offensive
yeah,
liability, and they started DeAndre Jordan twice in
I, I,
2022.
I'm not one to criticize NBA coaches because they know more basketball than I'll ever know, but I do not get that move. I do not understand starting
I
DeAndre
mean, they
Jordan.
don't really have another center. I mean, I guess Millsap is, and Gorgie Jang plays some center. Paul Reed, they love B-ball Paul up in Philly, but
If I'm the Sixers, like, look, you're huge underdogs in these two games without Joel. You're not supposed to win them. You're 8.5 point dogs in both
uh,
games. Like, go crazy. Do something. Like, play small. Like, do
yeah,
something
like
out of the
Thibault at
box that
center or
might
something.
work.
Yeah,
Like, they've had some success going small in this so far in the first two games. Like, it's actually produced some positive results. Like, whether it's Yang at center or even Tobias Harris at center, or like just going small has worked a little bit and kind of throwing the Heat off and helping the offense a little. Kind of create space for Maxey and Harden. Um, I think that's the way win without Joel in this series, or at least try to win. Yeah, maybe it doesn't work, but try something different. So I just didn't get that move, but I understand that the Sixers don't really have many
yeah,
options
no,
here
no,
with
no. I
Joel.
mean, Niang was 0
But
for 7 in Game 1. It's not like they've got
yeah,
like,
Go Tobias Harris at center.
yeah,
I don't know. Just try something different. I just don't think DeAndre Jordan is the answer.
yeah,
And I think that's look, going back to Tyler and Bam, they've taken advantage of the matchup.
yeah, they have. I mean,
Set it
Bam
up.
has dominated in this series. The Sixers don't have a center to
They don't
match
have
up
a
with him,
center to,
and
and credit to Bam because we always talk about him being aggressive and
yeah,
sometimes he's not as aggressive as people would want. He's been aggressive at looking for his own shot and attacking the mismatch, and he's played very well, obviously. And then Tyler, even before the series, even before Joel Embiid um, got hurt, but especially after the injury news came out, the Sixers play a lot of drop coverage. That's like Tyler eats that alive. And
mm-hmm.
we've seen that in the series. I mean, just hitting those mid-range shots with, off the screen where he has a little space and rising up for that shot and 3-pointers that he's, been able to find space on. This is a great matchup for him.
Yeah,
And we've seen both those guys taking advantage of kind of their advantage in this series.
yeah. Tyler Hero is climbing, and he's had it for a year, but he is really climbing the list of the best mid-range shooters in the league. Like it feels like anytime he can get to that, he loves that like kind of dribble. It's a kind of it's an old Iverson move, right? Where he would like dribble from the right side over to the left
Yeah.
and hit that like step or the fadeaway going toward the left baseline.
Baseline, yeah.
Like when he gets that shot, it goes in every time. It feels like.
He's rising up. I think he's like by the end of the playoffs, he could be considered one of the, not a top 5 scorer in the NBA, top 15 scorer in the NBA. I mean, is that
Yeah,
crazy? Like just
I
pure
mean,
scorer. He's an elite scorer. I love by the way, on TNT when he accepted the Sixth Man of the Year award, he was wearing a sweater of him, like a cartoon of him blowing bubbles, and it was a representation of how people call him Bubble Boy. I think it was this kind of a shot back at those, who kind of said he was only good because it was in the bubble. I thought that was a funny, like, subtle shot.
Yeah.
I didn't catch it live, but I caught it after when someone pointed it out.
Yeah. This series for him, he has been, for him and Bam, I think and Bam was really good in the first round. He just wasn't scoring a lot, but he was
Defensively, it was
incredible as an all. Yeah. Tyler, especially this start to the second round, I think has been a really nice validation for the season he has had and the career he has had, going back to, like you said, the bubble boy kind of stuff, where he was obviously, that 37-point game against the Celtics, like that, in a regular, for most NBA players, that's a signature moment right away. But like you said, the bubble stuff, and then the way the Heat went out, and his second year was just not, he didn't follow it up well. And then this year, obviously the regular season was great. He got off to a slow start in the playoffs, but seeing him get going in the second round here has been, I think, really validating for the believers in him. And I can never remember what we came down on a Harden Hero trade, but it's kind of like, it's really funny that that's what this is coming down to. It's basically Hero massively outplaying Harden in round 2 of the playoffs, and that could send the Heat through to the conference finals.
So you wouldn't do that trade today?
I would not do that trade today.
Which is crazy.
I don't remember what we said. I know we kind of wavered back and forth all the time, but yeah, they made the right move.
It's crazy because I think earlier this season, like very early this season, we posed that question again, like once Tyler had gotten off to a hot start. And I don't know what I said, and not to blame this on you, but I think you said you would do the trade, even like early this season.
Yeah.
It's insane how much the narrative has changed, not only around Tyler Hero, because last year the narrative was he doesn't work hard enough, he's interested in the wrong things, he's buying out, his own hype off the court. I never believed any of that stuff.
No.
It was just one of those things where it just wasn't a great year. He was struggling with, staying healthy. It was a weird season for everybody on the team.
Sophomore slump that happened.
Sophomore slump. But the narrative has flipped with him. Now he's one of the hardest workers on the team, and because he's playing really well, and he's one of the top scorers. He won Sixth Man of the Year, highest usage rate on the team, maybe definitely one of the most important.
And like you said, this is all stuff that Jimmy Butler has been telling us since the day, the first day they met.
He's just very skilled. We've seen it from the start. Like, he's just very skilled offensively.
I'm talking the work ethic stuff.
Oh, right? The work ethic stuff.
Like the first day we met him, he was talking about that.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I just crazy how fast the narrative and how drastic the narrative has kind of shifted with him just in a matter of a year. Because a year ago, the Heat were getting ready to get swept in the playoffs by the Bucks.
I was also laughing at the end of the game. The ESPN, I tried to get a picture of it, but couldn't get it in time. ESPN cuts to the bench, and there's Jimmy and UD laughing it up on the sidelines, and it's how we're a month removed from
a month and a half away from
Like it's flipped really fast for the Heat, where it's like you said, we don't want to bank on anything yet, but they're 2 wins away from the conference finals, and the next time they play at FTX Arena could be game 1 of the conference finals.
I think they've lost 1 game since they made that lineup change with Max Strus in the starting lineup. Other than they've lost 2 games, but one of them was the regular season finale when nobody played.
Right.
Other than that, their only loss with this new starting lineup and rotation is that Hawks game 3, which they're up by 14 in the fourth quarter and kind of blew it. But you look back at the run they've had over the past 3 or 4 weeks, with this new starting lineup and new bench rotation, it's kind of crazy how much success they found so quickly with this new alignment.
Yeah, that's a good place, I think, to pivot here and talk a little bit about the rotation. I guess another thing that has struck me from the series, we saw Duncan Robinson for the first time in this series with a minute left in the fourth quarter, in garbage time. Omer Yurtseven got into the series before Duncan, and Duncan is the 4th highest paid player on the team. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
and was a starter for 75 games or I don't remember if he played every single game, but basically, like you said, until the last 2 weeks of the season, essentially. Did not see this one coming.
No.
These days the playoffs have gone on. It has gone that way. And we know that just because Duncan Robinson is out of the rotation now doesn't mean if they play the Celtics in the conference finals and they need some more shooting to counter that great Celtics defense, that they might need Duncan. But pretty stunning to see. And again, it's hard to argue against it, right? The way that Strus has played, the way Victor Oladipo was really good again today. He's looked great now, basically since really dating back to that regular season, or we said the second to last game of the regular season, he was good. So every time we've seen him since, he's looked more than capable. Feels like they're riding the hot hands a little bit. But what have you thought about the rotation changes they have made? Like you said, not just dating back to the end of the regular season when they went with Strus, but
this series,
made the series, yeah.
I've been surprised. I mean, I've been one to say, even after Duncan was pulled from the starting lineup, that I thought he would be a consistent member of the rotation just because they needed shooting, and they've really tried to emphasize offensive spacing around Jimmy and Bam, and Duncan obviously gives them that. And considering, he started the playoffs by making 8 threes, and really hasn't done it. I don't know how many threes he's made since that game, maybe 1 or 2. Things have changed very fast for Duncan. And, I kind of understand it. Doesn't mean it, like I said, I am surprised. I kind of understand this because Victor has played well. I mean, he played well in those 2 games against Atlanta.
3 for 4 from 3 today, too.
3 for 4 from 3. I mean, when he's hitting his... to me, this is what I think the Heat are trying to do. I mean, they don't, you look at the rotation they're throwing out there, there are no defensive liabilities. There's nobody. I mean, I guess Tyler Hero teams can pick on Max Strus, which I think Max is actually a solid defender. We've talked about this. I don't think he's a liability defensively. He's not. So I guess Tyler's the only one. But even Tyler, he's gotten better. He's limited physically against certain guys, but for the most part, he could hold his own against a lot of guards. So I think they're really trying to go all in with defense, and hoping that Victor Oladipo can go 3 or 4 some days, from 3.
They won game 1 even though they only went 9 of 38 from 3.
And honestly, that game, there was some groupings where it was Butler, Oladipo, Martin, Bam, and Gabe Vincent. The offensive spacing wasn't great. There were a lot of times where, the offense was shaky that game. In game 1, the offense was not very good. They won because of an incredible defensive performance. Tonight, the offense was good. But spacing is an issue. So I don't know if it's the matchup or maybe because Kyle's out, they feel like they need another ball handler. Maybe Victor gives them that. Maybe against Boston, Duncan does play because they need more outside shooting, against that defense.
Yeah.
I don't know, but right now, this is working. Victor has looked really good off the bench. He guarded James Harden really well tonight in stretches when PJ wasn't on the court. That's kind of what we talked about Victor, David, a month or 2 ago when he returned. He could be this guy, this two-way player that you could turn to close games, another option for the Heat. And credit to him, he's turned into that. I didn't think, a month ago when he wasn't playing, I thought, they tried it didn't work. He's out of the rotation, but it looks like he's gonna, or it doesn't look like it. He might be an important player for them.
I'll be really curious to see what happens to his minutes when Lowry gets back.
For that, yeah.
Because that's like you said, part of his role is he's kind of the backup point guard essentially. But at the same time, he played 29 minutes tonight. Kyle, that's probably not what Kyle Lowry will play, I would guess, when he gets back for at least that first game. But it's not they're not just going to swap that out. I can't imagine. Vic is going to stay on the court until he gives him a reason not to be on the court. And it's hard to imagine right now. It's not it's not like it's a Jay Crowder thing, in the bubble, right? Where it was just he was shooting out of his mind. It was you can't take him off the court. Victor, other than the shooting, you said, has been good, but other than that, he has a track record. He's not gonna turn into a pumpkin here. He's who he is at this point.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, again, his defense is
Yeah,
really
exactly.
pivotal. The Heat have, in that bubble run, there were guys teams could pick on. It was Tyler Hero as a rookie defensively. It was Duncan Robinson.
Yeah.
It was at some points Kelly Olynyk. It was Kendrick Nunn. There were guys, teams could pick on defense with their defense. And right now, the Heat don't really have that again, other than Tyler Hero. So I think that's like the Heat are trying to address that and maybe put out better defenders where teams can't hunt mismatches. And that's why their defense has been great in the playoffs. I think second best behind Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to evolve and Duncan does get playing time in the next, if the Heat move on in the next series based on a matchup. But maybe not. Maybe this is what they go with. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see when Kyle returns, like whose minutes get cut because Gabe and Victor aren't each going to play 28 minutes when Kyle's back.
Yeah.
One of their minutes didn't go down dramatically, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I guess it could be Caleb Martin who played 13 minutes tonight, but how many guards are you going to play? You're going to play Gabe, Tyler, Victor, and Kyle big minutes. I don't know if that's going to work.
Yeah.
So they might have to pick three of those four, and one might not play or will play limited minutes.
Yeah, I going back to Duncan real quick, and the the Harden of it all is I think that's a really tough matchup for Duncan, right? That is like those are the kind of guys that Harden just abuses, right? Guys with slower feet.
Yeah.
Obviously, like we've said a million times, Harden
fouls a lot. I mean, Duncan
fouls a lot. Yes, that was
Yeah.
the next point I was gonna make. That is one of impatient defenders with slow feet are the guys that James Harden traditionally roasts with that quick first step and his knack for drawing fouls. Now, maybe this version of James Harden wouldn't be able to pick on Duncan Robinson to that degree, but again, it hasn't mattered because the Heat are just a wealth of options and are look just fine without Duncan. And Duncan, again, he's been just too streaky of a shooter to, it's that's with Tyler. Obviously, you just know what you're going to get on offense. He's going to be. It's impossible for him to really hurt you in a game at this point because he's a consistent enough offensive player. Strus, kind of hard for him to hurt you in a game because he's got that baseline, like he's going to be a net zero defensive impact. And then offense, like he's going to give you something, even if he's not making shots, the spacing. Duncan, if he's not making shots and he's not defending, he is useless, basically. And there have been too many nights this year where he just hasn't made shots. It's kind of like simple math. But again, if and when they play a team like the Bucks or the Celtics in the next round, and the shots will just be a little bit hard. Those are the two, other than the Heat, probably the two best defenses in the NBA right now. Shots get harder. You want a guy with some of that limitless range. And Duncan, again, he'll have a moment, assuming the Heat move on. I'm sure about it.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to agree. I think against those teams, Duncan will have a role because they're going to need that extra space with those two defenses. Obviously, two of the best defenses in the NBA, especially Boston. Philly, without Joel Embiid, not very good defensively, as we've seen. And offense has been, I've always said, if the Heat are going to be eliminated in the playoffs, it's going to be because of the offense.
Yeah.
Their defense is great. We know that. It's not a surprise. Their defense is going to continue to be great. But, tonight the half-court offense was very good. I think I tweeted that they're now 27, I think, in 27-1 this season when finishing with a half-court offensive rating of better than 105 points per 100 plays. That's kind of confusing. But basically when their half-court offense is good, they win because their defense is always consistent. It just hasn't been that for most of the playoffs. I mean, I think this is their first time reaching that mark since the first game of the playoffs in the half court. So their half court offense has kind of been pretty shaky for most of the postseason, but they've been winning despite it because their defense has been spectacular. So they still have things they need to solve offensively, and it's going to become even more important if they move on and face a defense like Boston and Milwaukee. That's really going to be the test to see if they could win despite their struggles in that area.
By the way, I said you got in before Duncan. I didn't realize Haywood Highsmith also got in before.
To To be honest, like game one, I don't think Duncan played, and I think
No, he
Yurt
didn't.
Seven did.
Did you play in game one?
I believe so,
Oh yeah, he
but
got 5 minutes.
so I'm a little surprised that he even put Duncan in that spot
Yeah.
because it's kind of like I don't know.
I do not remember those Europe minutes at all, by the way.
Yeah, I remember them vaguely. I was on deadline. I didn't really watch those minutes that
Yeah.
much, but I did see he was in and had like a few baskets. So
Yeah, he did.
that's
Went 3 for 4
yeah,
actually.
yeah. You're getting important playoff minutes.
Yeah.
This team is just so deep. I mean,
Well, yeah. So that was actually when you were
yeah,
listing off those guys in the bubble a couple of minutes ago. Like the just marginal. Obviously, they've made massive upgrades since then, right? You get Kyle Lowry. That's
right.
huge. Just the marginal upgrades they've made across the roster, like going from Kelly Olynyk to it's not like a 1-for-1
Deadman.
comparison, but yeah, or I'm not even Deadman. I'm thinking like PJ Tucker, right? Kelly Olynyk was a starting power forward for a lot of that year. You go from like Kendrick Nunn, who was obviously really good that year in the regular season, to Gabe Vincent, who actually was on that team, right? I
Yeah,
think, but
yeah.
he
He was
was.
two-way
He
contract
had like
player.
a random like good game out on the West Coast, if I remember correctly that
Yeah,
year.
he wasn't eligible to be to play in the playoffs because he was on a two-way deal, but he was with the team in the bubble.
Yeah. So you had just that's been an upgrade ultimately
Yeah,
from what Kendrick Nunn was in the playoffs then to what Gabe Vincent is now. Um, and then Max, just the marginal upgrades they've made across the
yeah,
roster. That's been really the story of the franchise, honestly, for the last couple of years. And you're seeing it now. Like they're winning without Kyle Lowry. Obviously, massive caveat with the Joel Embiid thing, but like it's a reminder that as big as like getting a move like Kyle Lowry was, and just the smaller moves they have made have really added up. And again, like Duncan Robinson's the fourth highest paid player on the team, and he's not playing in this series. And that only works when you nail like the Max Strus move, the Gabe Vincent move.
yeah,
Their depth is insane.
yeah. I mean, they have two undrafted players starting right now, and Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, who were two-way contract players last season. They're
Yeah.
starting playoff games and contributing positive minutes. And they have another one, Caleb Martin, who was not on a team in like a month, like a couple weeks before camp.
I do not understand how they got him on a two-way. Like I'm baffled by that. I've been baffled. He was good last year.
I don't. From what he told me, the only other offer he had was Portland. That's it.
It's crazy. Maybe I'm mixing him up. Maybe I just like conflate him and Cody.
Yeah.
But I remember Caleb being good whenever I watched him last year.
I'm surprised too. I mean, you would think you look around the league at different players around teams. You're like, there's not a place for Caleb somewhere. Like even if it's a minimum deal, like just the fact that they settle for a two-way contract. But like he's playing minutes for them off the bench. Victor Oladipo, who, again, a couple months ago wasn't even playing. Like he's playing important minutes. So it's just you have to credit the front office for finding these guys and then the coaching staff for developing these guys to actual NBA players who can play in the playoffs. Like that is really impressive. By the way, now that we were talking about the bubble run, I'm looking at like do you think this team is a lot better than that team?
I until we were talking about in this episode, I had not really thought about them as way better than that team, but I kind of think they are.
I mean, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, like Jimmy was great that playoff run, and so was Bam.
So that's the
So I
thing.
can't say
He
they're
was out of his mind during that run,
yeah.
but Jimmy's season, he's the same player basically he was that
Yes,
year.
I agree. I think they're like even Bam. Like Bam has grown, but like that playoff run, it was some of the best basketball of his career. So I would say that's equal. Jay Crowder, PJ Tucker, that's pretty even. Like PJ's been great, but Jay was great that run.
Yeah, especially when he was shooting. His shooting felt like he eventually started missing in the finals, and it was kind of over. But yeah,
Goran and Kyle. Goran again was
really
awesome
good. Yeah.
I mean, maybe the depth, bro. I mean, I'm looking at the roster: Tyler Hero, Andre Iguodala, Solomon Hill.
Yeah, so Tyler's
Kendrick
way better
Nunn.
than he was that year, but Duncan was ridiculous that year. So it's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, and Max Strus and Duncan kind of a little bit of a wash because Duncan was very good. So yeah, I would say this team is better just because like the back end of the rotation.
Yeah.
When everyone's healthy, but I don't know. It's pretty comparable. It's an interesting it'd be a tight game I think between those two teams. It's like
the defense is way better. That was what
Yes.
stood out. You talk about Goran Dragic and
Goran,
Kelly Olynyk and that's a pretty big swing there. But yeah, it's interesting that so much has stayed the same, but also so much has changed. Like they've really, I remember talking about the team that year, and we've talked about it on this show. Just like I kind of hated how much they were like, we want to play our defensive lineups. We want to play a lot of Andre Iguodala. I was just like, you have shooters, just like
pick and choose. Yeah,
just
one or the other.
Go offense and try to outscore teams. But that's not Spo's DNA, and you can see the team, and obviously it's not Pat Riley's DNA either. And you can see that they've taken what they had with that team and just kind of like reshaped it a little bit by changing up. Again, like that stars are the same for the most part. You swap Dragic with Kyle Lowry. That's an upgrade as a defensive player, maybe a slight downgrade offensively from what Goran was that year. But then every other piece, it's been like, get an offensive guy out, bring in a defensive guy, or a more two-way minded guy rather than just a pure Kendrick Nunn scorer type guy. Like they've really reshaped it, and good coaches adjust, but good GMs adjust a roster to make the coach make it work for what the coach does best, especially when it's a coach as good as Eric Spoelstra.
Yeah, like I don't think that much has changed from those that year. Like scheme wise, like no, I don't think a lot has changed. They just have the
pieces for it. They run less zone because they have to. They don't have.
They don't need to. Yeah, they don't need to because their man-to-man defense is really good. Yeah, I mean that was. You're right. That was the not to go too much on that team, but like that was the criticism with that roster is.
Right, they were a lot of offensive lineups and their defensive lineups.
Yeah, like it was hard. Like you couldn't really you couldn't do both at the same time, unless again you were putting Andre Iguodala out there with Jimmy Butler, and then all of a sudden the offense wasn't great. Yeah. So yeah, this is the Heat have a lot more two-way players. Tyler is better. The development of Gabe. I think the addition of Dwayne Dedmon, while it might not seem like much, having a backup center like that rolls to the basket.
Leonard was the backup center on that team. Yeah.
As a rim protector, can rebound. Like the Heat didn't have that as a backup center.
No.
Those years. So I think that has helped too. Yeah, I would say this team is better than that one. But I don't think it's a lot. Like I think they're pretty comparable, but there are slight upgrades.
Yeah, I think the Tyler leap separates it, right?
Yeah. Although Tyler was great. I mean, he was.
I know.
But yes, I think Tyler consistently is much better right now, obviously, than he was 2 years ago.
So what do you think? Is this series ending in Philly, or are we getting a Game 5 back here in Miami?
I think it depends on the Embiid.
Yeah.
I still think even if Embiid doesn't come back, I think Philly still gets one up there.
Yeah, Maxi's been so good to me, that I think he can, he's borderline elevated into start. It reminds me honestly a little bit of Tyler his rookie year, where it was just in the playoffs, all of a sudden people are like, oh, this guy's
very good. Yeah.
Yeah, gonna be an all-star in a year or two.
Also, they've shot the ball so poorly. I know they're not a great shooting team, but they just can't continue to shoot, 20% on threes.
Yeah. Like you said, I look at this roster, I'm like, who's even gonna make threes on this team?
Danny Green looks so bad tonight.
He's been awful all year.
1 for 10 from the field. 1 for 9 on threes.
Other than Tobias Harris and James Harden, Niang is, I guess, a pretty good shooter for a center, but
he's been shooting the ball really poorly.
Really badly. Yeah. Furkan Korkmaz, are you scared of him?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of shooting on the roster. They have a lot of centers. And I know I said they have no centers at the top, but backing up Paul Reed, Charles Bassey, Millsap, I don't know. We're oddly constructed roster.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's constructed around the idea we have Joel Embiid.
Embiid, right.
It would look a lot better if they had him, but
if you have Embiid, you don't need that many centers.
I know. But again, they some of these. This is all deadline, the Simmons thing
trade and stuff. Yeah.
Trade. Yeah.
Them
trading away Seth Allen in that trade is.
Look, the bottom line is the Heat are better.
Sorry, Seth Curry, not Seth Allen.
So the Heat are a better team.
Maryland shooting guard Seth Allen.
There's your Maryland reference for this.
Yeah, he had a good after he transferred to Virginia Tech. Actually, I think he might have gotten third team All ACC 1 year there.
There you go. For those who care, I was gonna say the bottom line is the Sixers are just a better team. I mean the Heat are the better team. Even with Embiid healthy, I thought the Heat were the better team. With Embiid out, it's not even a question. So if Embiid can't come back, this series doesn't go past 5. If Embiid returns, I don't know, maybe 6, maybe. But I don't even know how healthy Embiid, how effective Embiid would be in that situation with the finger injury, the facial injury, coming back from a concussion, which, according to a Chris Haynes report as of yesterday, he was like having trouble looking into his phone still, because of the bright light. So,
Hmm.
how effective will he be in a couple of days? Nobody knows until he gets out there. But yeah, I don't think this series shouldn't go past 5, in my opinion, either way. It really shouldn't. And that's good for the Heat because it looks like Milwaukee, Boston. It's going to be a long series.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really tough competitive series. They're going to beat each other up. Two very, very good teams. So if the Heat can take care of business, they could have another 4 or 5 day break in between series, which would be great for them, especially if Milwaukee, Boston go the distance.
Oh, I love Chris Haynes on the sidelines and for the series. I love when like there's like a print guy, and I think he's technically like he was on a like blogger right up in
Right.
Portland is how he got started. But I love a written word guy when he gets to
Many of the
the
sidelines.
sidelines. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool.
and he's plugged
It
in, obviously. Like
yeah. Yeah,
not to
for
take anything
sure.
away from the other sideline reporters around the league, but yeah, Chris Haynes out there reporting.
Is this a shot at George Sedano or something? Or
No, no, no.
I'm kidding. I love George. But yeah, no, it's been interesting to see the national media start to slowly come down here and like pay more attention to this team.
Well, it's
Obviously,
kind of funny because right, the whole like we talked about it a lot this year. That like the reason that the national meet like the Heat were like kind of this afterthought is there's no drama, right? They were just like kind of they were
yeah,
winning 4 out of every 5 games, and uh, Jimmy Butler was having a good year, and Bam was having a good year, and Kyle was having a good year, and no one was in the MVP race, and Tyler Hero locked up 6 man of the year in a week, and until Jimmy Butler tried to fight Eric Spoelstra, there was no controversy really. And all of a sudden, like we're here again, and the Heat could get to the conference finals in 10 games with 2 completely drama-free series. And like you can kind of still ignore the Heat because there's like every other series going on is way more interesting
yeah,
until Joel
yeah.
Embiid gets back.
Not to give out names, so I'm not gonna do that. But there's one national reporter that I was talking to a few days ago after game one, and he told me he spent a lot of time covering the bigger name, like, Brooklyn, Philly, all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff with all the drama going on. He said, I love, like, he's been more embedded with the Heat now. I love this. Like, they don't say anything, there's no controversy. All they do
I
is
think
win.
I
Like, this is
heard
great.
this person interviewed on another podcast the other day and talking about the same thing. So
Yeah, he's like, this is great. Like, there's no, they don't say anything controversial. Like, they just win. Like, this is awesome. Like, it's just so different from the other, um the other big
marquee
name
teams, yeah.
marquee teams in the league. It's just a Heat team that, again, like, they really haven't had, other than that March, like, couple weeks in March where, we had this timeout incident between Udonis and Jimmy and Spo. Other than that, like, it's been a pretty ho hum season of just like
Yeah, for a
taking
team
care of
with
business.
Jimmy Butler on it.
Yeah, for sure. Right, right. So, and that's just continued in the playoffs. It's just been, like you said, this is not a very interesting series as of right now. Um, it's just been kind of like we said at the top of the episode, the Heat taking care of business and doing what they're supposed to do. Nothing spectacular. It's just what they've, done pretty much all season.
Yeah. All right. I think we can wrap things up there. Anthony, you're headed up, I assume, tomorrow, Thursday, up to Philly.
Yes, I'll be in Philly
Gonna
tomorrow.
get some cheesesteaks.
Yeah, why not?
There you
Although
go.
nothing can compete with Hungry Bear in Miami. I know I'm
I've
going to
never had
Philly,
it.
home of the cheesesteak,
Where is
but
that? I've never
you
had
have to
that.
go to Hungry Bear in Miami, which is on Kendall, not Kendall, sorry, on 104th and once around 117th across from Miami-Dade Community, or Miami-Dade College now, I guess it's called.
Yeah.
Legendary Miami spot.
Interesting.
You get the Philly cheesesteak with provolone cheese. I know that's kind of like blasphemous.
I'm a provolone cheese guy,
I
but I
like
like
provolone.
cheese whiz
It
like
is the best cheesesteak I've ever eaten in the
interesting.
heart of
I'm
Kendall.
gonna have to try this. You gotta like that's like how we're gonna maybe when the Heat knocks off the Sixers. That's how we can
We'll eat some Philly cheesesteaks on
celebrate.
this
Yeah, exactly. It'd be
during the
like oh,
pod.
these are way better than Philly cheesesteaks.
Yeah,
These do
yeah.
look pretty good in the pictures I'm looking at.
They're really good. I mean, you can
They
ask.
shred the meat the right way.
Yes, you can ask any true Miamian about Hungry Bear, and they will know immediately what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'll have to go check this out. These are pretty good. All right, you can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chiang. He'll be up in Philly eating cheesesteaks that are worse than Hungry Bear cheesesteaks. You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. I am mostly on the Panthers beat, but I am dropping on some F1 coverage this weekend. I was out at the track today, and
How much experience do you have with that, David?
pretty.
Have you covered? I mean, you've covered
I
NASCAR, I
watched the
guess.
Netflix show. That's about it.
I've heard great things about that Netflix show, but yeah,
It's
that's gonna be enough. I mean, we don't.
Yeah, I was out there today. I walked. They did like a tour of the like campus, like the infield, basically. I don't know if that's what you call it in F1. That's
Yeah,
what I called it in my story. But they've got like a yacht club that is fake water. They just
I
got
heard
some
about
boats
that.
like stuck in like some
Yeah.
epoxy or whatever.
Do they know
Uh,
that Miami Gardens is like landlocked? Like, do
I
they know
know.
that coming
I
into this?
wrote my story, which is not posted, right? It'll be
Yeah.
up tomorrow morning around the same time this podcast goes up. I wrote the same thing. Like they've kind of tried to put Miami Beach in the middle of Miami Gardens, which is like 20 miles away from Miami Beach.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going to different sports now, real quick. The Panthers.
Yeah, that
What?
was not good. I think the Caps they got to win game two. I think if they win game two, they'll be fine. If
Too many
not,
penalties, right? Like they got to set
yeah,
up
they
penalty
kind
box.
of they were like kind of chasing the game, right? Like you I know they actually I thought played really well in that penalty kill to start
Hmm.
the game. They obviously give up the goal at the very end of it, but like they just kind of they could never get settled basically, and I think probably wore them out a little bit early on. Um, and then they should have won the game though. Still, they
Yeah. You're
had
up
a
2-1. Yeah.
terrible turnover, and then one more defensive breakdown, and they actually like way outshot them in the third period, which is usually the team that gets more shots scores more goals. Um,
It's usually how it
but
works.
it's like this the teams that play this crazy offensive style that traditionally doesn't work in the playoffs. Now the Panthers are playing offense, have as good an offense as like one of the 20 best offenses in NHL history, so it's like an outlier, but you got to play a little differently when the scoring goes down. So they got to prove they can do that, right? That's what everyone's waiting on.
Just brings back. They'll
I
probably win this series because they're the better team and they're one of the best, but maybe best team in the NHL, like as record wise. But it just brings back bad memories, right? Like
right. I
this is
mean,
like not how you
like
want to
that was
start the
all
run.
my
Yeah,
replies. Was just like same old Panthers,
yeah.
and it's hard to like I get it, right?
Until
Like
they win a series, you can't say anything because
yeah,
they just haven't been out of the first round in so long. So
yeah, they got to win. They got to win game two, and I think they'll be fine if they win game two, but um, not the start they were looking for. It's hockey. Hockey's crazy.
I'll say this: if they don't win the first, and if they get eliminated in the first round this year, I don't know if anybody will ever trust the Panthers ever again,
I
no matter
know.
how good the team is.
I know. It's funny, like so in the last 20 years, the team with the best record in the league has won one Stanley Cup and lost in the first round 4 times.
That's insane.
Like it happens a lot. And actually, the
Yeah,
last time
hockey's
it
weird.
happened was
Yeah.
that Lightning team that got swept out of the first round by Sergei Bobrovsky and the Blue Jackets, and then they come back and win the next year. So like, it could happen.
Yeah.
Like that would not shock me if that exact scenario played out with this team because the Panthers bring pretty much everyone back next year. But we're
But
getting
no,
too
but
far
but
ahead of
entering
ourselves.
next year, no one
Yeah,
will
no one.
reliance
It'll
on
be
this
like
team.
same old
Yeah,
Panthers.
no matter how good they are. But
Yeah,
I think we'll see what happens. They should win the series, but as you said, hockey's random, so who knows?
yeah. All right, let's wrap things up there. Thanks as always for listening, everyone, and we will talk to you guys next week.